Very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you to the organizers for having invited me. I'm very happy to share our experiences on implementing the HTA in oncology care in India. And I'll be specifically talking more in the context of PMJY, how HTA has been used so far, and what are the provisions that we've created for a greater uptake of HTA evidence into policy making for oncology care. Just for the introduction of participants who may not be as familiar with the program, which is Ayushman Bharat PMJY, this is a large tax funded health insurance program that was introduced 4 years ago to cover about 107 million families, which incorporate about nearly 500 million individuals. And these families were assured of a cashless hospitalization cover of about 500,000 per year, which was for any kind of a secondary or tertiary care hospitalization, which is indicated as per the health benefit package. And the package comprises of now about 1670 procedures, which can be accessed at either of the close to about now 30,000 public and private hospitals that are empaneled under the scheme. The price of the package that is paid to the providers covers the entire cost of services that are provided during an episode of hospitalization, which includes any procedure, includes the admission and the cost of the stay during the hospital, as well as covering the cost of diagnostics that may have to be undertaken 3 days prior to the hospitalization, and medications that the patient is advised to continue for 15 days following the discharge of the patient. So it's quite a comprehensive package in that sense. And talking about oncology in particular, the scheme has evolved over the years, the last 4 years, and there have been 4 different revisions of the health benefit package, which are shown on your slide in terms of HPP 1, 2, 2.1, 2.2, and now the most recent one, which is the HPP 2022. And what the slide shows is the evolution in the number of packages that have been added over the years specifically for oncology care. And as you can see that there's been quite a significant increase. And as of now, there are about total of 557 packages, which includes packages for medical oncology, surgical oncology, and radiation oncology. And there has been quite a significant increasing trend in terms of the utilization. So we've seen over the last 4 years that there has been an increase in the number of claims that have been put in specifically for the packages that are present within the specialties of medical, surgical, or radiation oncology. And the size or the rate of increase has been quite significant, which in a way reflects on the sort of uptake of patients and the uptake of scheme in terms of both from the demand side as well as from the supply side as well. So with this brief background, I'll now switch on to the attempts towards incorporating HTA evidence for improving oncology care under PMJY. And I'll try taking a few case studies to basically illustrate two parts. The first is how the HTA evidence has been used to rationalize even the existing packages which had been incorporated since the beginning of the scheme. And two, I'll also give some insights into what are the mechanisms that have been put in place in order to make use of HTA evidence to make decisions on incorporating new health benefit packages, as well as decisions around pricing of these packages as well. So the first example that I'd like to take is specifically for a package that we have for use of adjuvant trastuzumab therapy, which is given in case of breast cancer patients who are HER2 positive. The key question which always remains debatable is around the duration of the therapy. And while the original package that was incorporated in the PMJY allowed 4 cycles of trastuzumab, however, we continued to get a lot of requests and demands from various stakeholders to increase the number of cycles to as high as 16 or 18. Now, when you look at the guidelines on the from different societies, whether or different organizations, be it ICMR, NCG, or what existed as the standard treatment guidelines for the PMJY in the past as well, there has been quite a variation in terms of the recommendation. And while a lot of international guidelines do continue to recommend 1 year use of trastuzumab for patients with breast cancer, however, the NCG guidelines gives certain recommendation in terms of whether the use is recommended, desirable, or optional among patients who are in stage 2, 3, or 4. And within the PMJY, since the beginning of the scheme, there was, as I mentioned, that while 4 cycles was what was recommended, was what was allowed for use by the providers. However, the standard treatment guidelines that were there as kind of prescriptive approach for the providers, it also had did not very clearly spell out that what should be the duration over which this drug should be used. And then we had a paper that was published on the use of trastuzumab and the cost effectiveness of the use of trastuzumab among breast cancer patients in India. And this paper eventually gave estimates of how much is the probability of the drug used to be cost effective at the given levels of threshold for considering it to be cost effective, both for the short duration trastuzumab, which is 9 weeks, 6 months, and the long duration, which is 1 year. And what we find is that both the 6 months and the 9-week use of trastuzumab seem to have high probabilities for being cost effective. So as a result, the guidelines for use of trastuzumab for reimbursement under the PMJY were revised, and the number of cycles which are now permitted for use was increased from 4 to 8. However, despite several recommendations, several suggestions coming in to increase it up to 16 or 18, the same was denied. The second case study that I would like to take up is around the use of radiation therapy for breast cancer again. And there was a recent publication on the cost effectiveness of post-mastectomy radiotherapy for breast cancer. It had several important findings, of which two were particularly very important from the context of PMJY. The first was that while post-mastectomy radiotherapy was shown to be cost effective, it was recommended that in node negative disease it is not cost effective. And so what it meant was that limiting the treatment to disease specific systemic therapy alone actually had lesser costs and higher benefits than any kind of a radiotherapeutic scenario. And second important recommendation was that the hypofractionated regimen is the one that is more cost effective than the long duration regimens. So those are two important findings that were relevant from the PMJY context as well. And then we tried analyzing the data that on claims within PMJY, and what we realized was that close to about 12% of the total claims for radiation therapy among breast cancer patients was among those who did not have a node positive disease. So as a result, what we are contemplating, and this is still a work in progress, is that the application of post-mastectomy radiotherapy should be limited among patients who are node positive alone. This alone has a potential cost savings of close to about 570 million Indian rupees on an annual basis for the scheme. Similarly, the second decision that potentially could be taken based on this, and this is again something that is in pipeline, is that the number of fractions that should be permitted, the hypofractionation should become the more appropriate norm for utilization under the PMJY. But when we look at the data on utilization and claims, we find that more than about 2/3 of the total claims, patients were the packages that were picked that were chosen were the ones that had more than 16 fractions application. And so this is something that is again bound to bring in a very significant savings in cost if the amendment is made in the standard treatment workflows, as well as the IT configuration is modified in a way that the patients with breast cancer who require post-mastectomy radiotherapy are entitled to a hypofractionation schedule. The third case study that I want to take up is in the context of a variety of medical oncology drugs that keep coming for consideration for use within the health benefit package. And this was the table that I'm presenting you here is based on a study that was undertaken as a multicentric study And in several of these studies, we had very significant input, and they were done under the overall guidance of Professor Sudeep Gupta, who's also here chairing the session, and also Professor Lalit Kumar and several other leading medical oncologists. Uh, an important recommendation that came from this study was that if these drugs were to be used for reimbursement purposes, then there has to be a certain degree of price that has to be reduced in order to make these drugs cost effective in Indian context. And the last column actually shows the extent to which there should be a price reduction of these drugs relative to what are the current market prices. And so this is something which is a work in progress again, and we are working both with the Department of Pharmaceuticals to see the provisions if there are for making any kind of regulatory changes, or if we were to incorporate these into our health benefit package, then could the prices of the provider payments be made in a way that they reflect a value-based price. So this is again a work in progress, and this is something that we are likely to take up during the next revision of the health benefit package, which may happen next year. Now, having said that about some of the case studies that I wanted to illustrate on how decisions have been made or are being made, this is a process that we've tried to set up whereby new inclusion requests for health benefit package could be considered for an assessment using standard principles of health technology assessment. And within the National Health Authority, we've created a unit which is named as the Health Financing and Technology Assessment Unit. The function of this unit is to actually receive topics, prioritize those topics, and these are topics that stakeholders have submitted for inclusion into the health benefit package. Then undertake some preliminary evidence synthesis, work in partnership with Indian Agency for Health Technology Assessment, and based on the evidence make decisions about inclusion in the package. So this is the kind of workflow that is there, where we have created a provision whereby in any of these stakeholders which are listed on your slide here, which could be public sector state health agencies which are managing the program at the state level, industry representatives, professional associations, hospitals, doctors, and even patient groups as well, they can submit topics to the NHA. This unit which has been created would work by making some kind of evidence or topic prioritization or preliminary evidence synthesis, and then work in close partnership with the HTIN, which is the body for HTA generation, evidence generation in India, and work in partnership with this agency in order to get the necessary evidence or get full HTA studies commissioned and undertaken. And then based on that, we get the evidence, we make decisions. And there is also a provision that has been created for creating a price negotiation and strategic purchasing committee, which will undertake the job of strategic purchasing by negotiating the prices with the industry, with the pharmaceuticals, as well as healthcare providers. And this is the we have created a portal on the NHA website, where on the portal itself the nominations are invited, and any of the stakeholder can submit a topic for inclusion within the health benefit package. And there's a detailed set of information that would be sought from the stakeholders on various aspects of the submission that they're making, whether it is clinical effectiveness, whether it is the cost or the price at which this is likely to be available, related to any issues related to ethical or legal or regulatory frameworks, etc. So there are several inputs that are asked to the stakeholder to provide information on, and based on that, there would be a decision that would be made. There are very explicit criteria also that have been identified for making decisions as well, and 4 important criteria that have been chosen to make decisions on inclusion of health benefit packages are cost effectiveness, impact that a new intervention is likely to have on lowering the out-of-pocket expenditure, the impact it is likely to have on bringing about a more equitable use of healthcare services, and finally the budget impact. So these are the 4 important criteria that have been explicitly listed to make decisions on these new submissions. And we have been very transparent over the last year or so to make policy documents that transparently puts across the different processes and the criteria that we are trying to use. And herein, I'm showing you two sets of policy documents. The first is on provider payment and price setting under PMJY, where we've explained our entire approach on how the HTA evidence is going to be made use of in making decisions on health benefit packages. And a second policy document, which is going to be released during the coming weekend on the 25th of September, which is an approach of the of NHA to move the PMJY from a more volume-based to a more value-based care approach, whereby hospital performance incentives would be determined based on the patient-reported outcomes. And we also recognize the importance of making sure that we have a standardization of processes and guidelines, etc. And in order to do that, we've been very actively working with the HTA agency in India. And these are the set of guidelines that have been produced, whether on the general processes of HTA, whether on principles of costing, on principles of how budget impact analysis are to be done, and even quality check guidelines on how whether or not the HTA assessments that are done are likely to withstand the kind of peer review of a high quality. And similarly, we do also recognize that conducting such HTA assessments do have significant requirements for data as well. So there's a work that is also ongoing on trying to create some of the important basic parameters that are required for undertaking any HTA assessment. And this is the effort towards creating a health system cost database. And the second is around creation of a value set for EQ5D, which measures the health related quality of life. So these are two important stepping stones, or I would say the data requirements that HTA researchers need in order to conduct an HTA study. So that's it, where I'll stop, and I would be very happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.